working on it all summer, so.
I don't see you now behind that big screen. All right, I'm going to call our Select Board meeting of Tuesday, January 28th to order. And the first item is approval of the agenda. Who moved it? Victor?
Yeah, second.
Seconded, Farhan. Are there any requested changes to the agenda? Okay, and we do have a number of legal matters. I hope you all got your packet to review, because we got some stuff to talk about afterwards. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Next is approval of minutes of our January 14th, 2020 Select Board meeting.
Moved.
Moved and seconded. Any requested changes to the minutes? None. Hearing none, then all in favor of approving the draft minutes of January 14th Select Board meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? All right. Next is citizen comments, and is there anybody here for something that is not on the agenda? And I believe you would like to speak to the board? Did you want to speak to the board?
I was told that I should ask the town clerk, or is that what it is? So I can
Okay, so you're good? Okay. Is there anybody else here for something that's not on the agenda? Okay. Hearing none, we'll move on to Middlebury College's request for blanket approval for serving alcohol at catered events from May 1st, 2020 to April 30th, 2021. And they're asking us to renew the blanket approval that provides the college annually in lieu of making individual requests for serving liquor at catered events on campus throughout the year. Requested approval period, as he said, May 1st to 2020 to April 30th, 2021. Pleasure of the board.
I'll move to approve Middlebury College's request for blanket approval to serve alcohol at catered events on the campus from May 1st, 2020 to April 30th, 2021.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any comments on it? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the request signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Chief.
Good evening.
Good evening.
All right, cruiser bids are a little different this year. As we have been requested to by the Energy Committee and by policy, I guess, was to make sure we included a hybrid or electric vehicle in our bid specifications when we sent them out. So we put that in there as a bid alternate. And we've received 4 bids. There aren't any regular sedans available this year. Chrysler stopped making them for the year. So the bids we got were from Foster Motors with a net bid of $31,515. Central Chrysler Jeep Dodge in Raynham, Massachusetts for $31,938, and both these vehicles are 2020 Dodge Durangos. It's an SUV type vehicle. The other 2 bids came from G-Stone Motors. One was $32,663, pardon me, for a 2020 Ford utility. And then they also put in a bid for the Ford Hybrid, which at $34,875. And all the bids from Foster Motors, from G-Stones, included a $5,000 credit for trade-in of one of our older vehicles. So that's it. All the vehicles meet the specifications that we put out. All are serviceable vehicles. So I guess I'll entertain any questions anybody has. Laura's smiling.
I'm going to support the hybrid.
Sounds like a setup to me.
Yeah, I know. Even though it's a slightly more expensive bid, I think that it'll pay back, and it's the direction we want to be moving in. So I would move in favor of that bid for the hybrid.
I think the board's talking first, but I'll get with you.
I'm just curious, Tom, you said there are no more sedans available, right?
Right, there's no more sedans. So the only vehicles bid on were the SUVs.
So you said Dodge would do the Charger, but no other manufacturer has sedans for you, or?
We have not been getting any bids on any other sedans other than Chrysler.
Okay. So, but like Laura, I'm in favor of the hybrid, because my previous car was a hybrid. I drove for 10 years now. I just bought a new one with a hybrid, but I don't know if it's suitable for the police department. You should tell us if it's not hybrid, why not?
The vehicle itself is the Ford Explorer. We have two of them right now. The frame and the operation of the vehicle is the same, whether it's the hybrid or the electric.
Yeah.
They've designed the electric engine to be underneath the vehicle, so it doesn't take up any room. We're not dealing with batteries or anything like that. The only thing is, this is the first model year of this vehicle, so we don't have any kind of run history on this from any other agencies that could tell us how things are going. We don't know exactly what this vehicle can sustain as far as the hybrid engine. We do have a hybrid. It's an unmarked car. We use it for our investigator, and it works fine. It gets about 5,000 miles a year. We put about a cup full of gas in it every month, but it's not used for police patrol purposes. So it's a different vehicle. It's doesn't bear any relationship to a frontline police cruiser. Size-wise, specification-wise, every one of these vehicles meets the specifications, and they're all suitable for service. We're just a little hesitant to jump on the bleeding edge. These are being promoted fairly heavily by Ford. New York City is buying a bunch of them.
Yeah.
I think several thousand of them they're going to be putting in addition to the Ford sedan, which was not bid on here, which for us, it would have been a little too small, that car anyway. So that's how the bids are. I haven't found anything negative on them. By the same token, I haven't found anything positive because I just don't have a user history yet. And I'm not aware of anybody in Vermont right now that has the Ford hybrid.
Nick?
Chief, presumably its handling is similar, but have any of you been able to drive one to see how it feels?
No, we've not been in the car. I sent about, I don't know how many got it, a news item on the vehicle. We did a fairly extensive look at the hybrid, and it's some performance testing on it, which seemed to be satisfactory to us.
What's the vehicle it's replacing? Is it a sedan or is it one of the
A
SUVs?
sedan.
It's one of the old SUVs that we have, the
Oh,
oldest one.
So does is the body style changed to the point where we can or cannot use some of the existing gear?
Yeah, there's been some modifications to the body style. This is a 5-year-old SUV that we're trading in, so we can't transfer any of the equipment from that car to this. Even the hub size is different on the wheels. We thought we'd be able to save a little money by not having to get the spare tires for snow tires, but apparently the hub size is different and the tire size is slightly different, so we can't transfer an existing stock of wheels with the air pressure sensors in them to this vehicle.
Okay.
And that goes for all the vehicles. They're all going to be new. They're all going to have to be equipped from the ground up by an upfitter.
It's a good question.
Victor?
Well, I mean, I drive a hybrid, and it seems to me environmentally it makes very good sense. Is there any reason why we should go with a standard? In other words,
No, other than that, it's new. This is a new police-type
It's a
vehicle.
new-
Hybrids have been around a while, and hopefully they've gotten the bugs out of them.
right.
So we just don't know in sustained patrol service
Mhm.
what the record of this is going to be. We just don't know.
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything negative. Again, I haven't heard anything. We don't know anybody that's operating these as a police car right now.
My only concern will be accumulating 25 to 30,000 miles, as you say, for a hybrid, which we don't have any data on. I don't, like you said, nobody has used it before.
Yeah, we anticipate in the first year anywhere between 25 and 30,000 miles, so, more or less. So we don't know. We don't know.
Perhaps it's worth a try.
Well, it's a single vehicle bid year, so, I mean, if this was a 2-vehicle bid year, I'd be probably a little queasy. That's half the serviceable fleet would be unknowns. But all the other vehicles are fine. The Durango has been making a police vehicle, a special service police vehicle for many years. I mean, Chrysler has in the Durango. This is the first year they've made it as a patrol vehicle, which means it's outfitted a little bit different, but it's the same, essentially the same product that they put out for several years that was designed for canine handlers and things like that for other types of police service.
I was gonna say, I did some very basic calculations based on what the information you sent out from Ford, and, and it looked like a very conservative estimate of 3.5 years to pay back the additional cost, based on gas savings. Most of which looks like it happens when you're idling.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, again, you know, we don't know because we don't have any body of
Right.
work to look at to say. Ford has some estimates,
Mm-hmm.
and the publication, I think some of you may have got it, I think Laura did, I sent it to Laura a while ago, on what they think would be saved based on operating 16 hours a day. Well, this is gonna be operated 24 hours a day, under various conditions, so, I don't know. We'll see what the savings are. There will be savings, undoubtedly.
Mm-hmm.
The extent of that, I don't know.
I'd love to find out.
Well, there should be savings, but it's not just the cost of the gasoline. It's what others in. Are they giving any sort of reliability rate on the batteries? I mean, it seems like it's not as
Yeah.
problematic as it was once believed to be.
No, I didn't see any kind of lifetime rating on it, but they are marketing this as a police patrol vehicle.
And that's,
So there's an assumption that this is going to have a service lifespan of about 4 years.
what's the warranty on it? Do you know?
I don't remember offhand. I could
All right,
look through the,
Normally, the batteries on hybrids now is 10-year, 100,000
that's kind of what I'm thinking.
is
yeah.
what they offer you on the battery.
and this vehicle, if used in patrol use, will be pushing 100, a little over 100,000 when it comes out of service.
Mhm.
Ross?
There's an assumption that the hybrid's going to be saving the town. I'm just wondering what is the miles per gallon of the vehicles and what is the difference there?
Ford, on their estimate, they list it as a total of 24 miles per gallon city, whereas the other cars are coming in about 17 or 18 miles per gallon city. And that's figuring a mixture of fuel and electric use. It really, it's hard to tell. I mean, this is something that they can only estimate what they're gonna get.
And I guess I understand that electric vehicles tend to have less maintenance costs associated with them.
Well, it's not pure electric, so don't make that mistake. This is not a pure electric vehicle. It's a gasoline vehicle with an electric supplement, not, and so in your case, the point you made up is right, but that's not to be confused with this.
Yeah, we looked into it, and it was about a 41% of the fuel consumption, which is pretty significant when you look at it over the course of the year, which means 1 year could almost be fully paying back the extra costs.
In 1 year?
Well, depending if it's 30,000 miles, it'll be pretty close. And the idling was 40%, so it's 0.2 versus 0.5 gallons per whatever time it was.
So is it a zero idling vehicle?
No,
No.
it's 0.2 gallons versus 0.5 for,
Uh-huh.
I forget what the amount of time is for that, but 40%.
A lot of it depends on what's the draw on the engine is and what the engine needs to run, so it'll go on and off. We had looked at those devices some years ago that would kind of do the same thing, turn the engine on, turn it off as you got a battery draw. Some of those were catching on fire, and there were some problems with those, so I stayed away from them. They didn't seem to
Good
be.
call on that one.
Yeah. Didn't seem to be very practical. Technology never caught up with it.
So I'm sensing interest in, especially it being a one-vehicle bid year, of maybe this would be a good time for us to
Hybrid.
try a hybrid vehicle in this particular application. If that's the pleasure of the board, I would entertain a motion.
Well, it looks like just before I do that, they're offering, as you say, 100,000-mile warranty on the vehicle, so, on the powertrain, so it's gonna be the life of we're gonna have it. Okay.
I'll move. Were you gonna move it?
No, well, I
Okay.
mean, I could, but you seem like something you'd like to do a lot, so. You know, as you're approaching your swan song, I'm not gonna take this from you.
We'll give you 2 more.
You look like you were halfway there. Okay, so I'll move that we award the contract to G-Stone for the purchase of the Ford Inceptor for $34,875.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Are there any other questions or comments before we vote? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to approve the purchase of the hybrid vehicle for the next police department car, or SUV, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? We'll give it a try, chief.
Yeah, we
Good data
monitor,
on this, though.
We monitor the gallon use, the
Yeah.
fuel use on each car, so we'll be able to track this as we go
Okay, because
along.
we're gonna wanna know that.
Yeah, yeah.
It'd be good info for us as we decide going forward.
Maybe also keep track of maintenance too, like if you see more or less
Yeah, DPW does the maintenance track. We track the gallon use for each car. So we could tell you how many gallons of gas in any one of our cars is used during the course of a year or a month or however you wanted to track it.
Okay.
I think because of the idling of the car a lot, I don't think it's gonna be an optimum gas mileage, I'm assuming.
Yeah, there will be a savings.
There will
t-
be. Yeah, of course,
Undoubtedly.
yeah.
I mean, because when the electric runners, we're not burning gas. It's not an 8-cylinder engine. It's a larger 6-cylinder engine, so we're gonna see some savings anyway. And as a fact, all the vehicles had the same, an equivalent 6-cylinder engine. So that's where we are with that, and we'll
Okay.
follow it.
Okay.
And Chief, you wanna bring us up to speed on your public health and safety meeting?
We had our meeting last night, or yesterday afternoon. At the meeting, we invited a number of people there interested in the homeless situation. There might have been 15 or 16 folks there. I don't know, Laura, about that, right? About that. And the intent was not to solve the issue of homelessness at a public safety meeting. What we did was created a homeless task force. Joshin Byrne,
No, Brian?
Brian, well, he goes by Joshin, I guess.
Oh, he does, okay,
He let us know that today.
okay.
Anyway, whatever.
Uh-huh.
Formally with the Vermont Community Foundation, has agreed or has offered to kind of manage and have some oversight, administrative oversight. So he'll be the one getting everybody together. Our first meeting, we want to get going right away, is Thursday afternoon at 3:30 at Hope. So Gene Montrose has offered to host this and host the meetings, and we're going to jump in feet first and start moving along to try to see what is the situation. Provided them some statistics yesterday on some of the issues that have been going on. And so this is the task force. Randy Krakowski is part of this. There's a bunch of people that want to. Hannah Moss at the college is a student working with UVM Health Network, did a project over the J term on homelessness. So she was there yesterday, and she's going to exchange a lot of information that she has found out as well. She had a very specific project where she wanted to collect certain data from Addison County. So we'll be looking at that too. So I think the first meeting Thursday will just kind of get ourselves oriented and look at what we already have for data and then go from there. And we want to have something substantive in the short term, like quickly, like within a few months, come back with an answer as to where we're going to go so that the board, the Public Safety Committee can then maybe recommend policies or something for the Select Board in terms of dealing with this.
Yeah.
We don't want this to be a committee that goes on endlessly.
I love optimistic committee agendas.
I know where that's coming from, that's why I'm chuckling. Heather's a frustrated committee chair on one committee right now, because
Right, so-
she had set as equally aggressive of a schedule for herself, and she's feeling like she let herself down, but we knew it was gonna be a difficult
It was
task.
just, it's a humble experience, it's
Yeah.
not just all.
But she's still smiling, so I'm
Oh, yeah.
encouraged.
Oh, yeah. One of the things that would be interesting to know is we've talked about getting a screener back into Addison County, and it keeps, I keep hearing in discussions with the legislators, well, in Chittenden County, they're funding it through the community and the health network and whatnot. It'd be nice to know a more rural county, how they're funding it. It doesn't have the big players of Chittenden County.
Yeah, it's not just the screener. The screener goes part and parcel with a place to put them.
Yeah,
In other words, they're screened when we bring them to Rutland. So we do get them screened when they get to Rutland. The thing is that time that it takes to take somebody and then transport them to Rutland in the back of a police car, and then find a screener there. If their behavior is too outrageous that they can't screen them, they just go to jail, essentially is what happens. What we were looking for here is to have both things combined, a place where we can bring an inebriate where they're going to get screened and monitored at the same time. There aren't so many so that you need a full-time facility, but an existing facility, years ago, 27, 28 years ago, we used to bring them to the sheriff's department because they had a jail there. And we could bring them there and they'd monitor them all night. And the screener came from the counseling service, took care of that, and they'd go to the jail. We lost that years and years ago. So now we're kind of defaulted to bring them to Porter Hospital if we have to, or we bring them to Rutland. You know, it's just kind of this, whatever we can do at the time. So what we're looking for Addison County is a place where we can bring an inebriate, so that we're not driving over an hour in the winter, that we can get them screened and placed overnight.
What level security of a room do you need? I mean,
It doesn't need a lot of security.
Sure.
Grace House is not a secure facility. They have about 4 or 5 beds, and they have an on-duty, I don't know if it's a nurse or somebody with medical training that's there that monitors them. They only go there if their behavior warrants them going there. Again,
Yeah.
the same token, if we had somebody that was combative, they would have to go to jail. There's just no choice about
Yeah.
that. But most of them aren't. Most of them go to Grace House and go to bed, where they have somebody watching them, and then they try to move them to a care facility afterwards if they need further counseling, or refer them for services.
so it's realistic to think we could come up with a place here in Addison County.
Yeah, we need a bed.
Yeah.
1 or 2 beds that were available. Very rare to have 2 at a time, even for the whole county.
Yeah.
A bed and somebody to watch over them. And what that takes, what that'll look like, where it goes, I don't know.
Would
Yeah.
seem like we could solve that problem.
It's a fairly easy one to solve because you don't need a jail, you don't need a secure facility, you need a
Yeah.
bed for them to sleep in to make sure that they're okay.
Okay.
And that's part of what I heard that this task force would tackle, is that kind of practical answer, you know, to what could we do to alleviate the situation right now.
Right. Most inebriates,
and-
we find an adult to take care of them,
Mhm.
and that's fine. We can always continue to do that. It's the 50 or 60 or 70 that we've had that don't have anybody to take care of them, that then become wards of us.
Yeah.
What happened to the space at the sheriff's department? They don't have that?
They remodeled and took a contract with the federal government for federal prisoners in the 90s, and so that eliminated any use of that facility for anything local. And now they don't have a jail at all. So when they lost the federal contract,
But that'll be a good place to have a space, right?
well, as long as they had somebody there 24/7, which they don't.
They don't have it?
No.
Okay.
No, they're out of there at 5 o'clock.
And what about financing this?
You know, it's a county initiative. It would be for the whole county, so
Yeah,
it's,
yeah.
no single town should bear the
Right.
burden of that cost. So I don't know. I don't know where that financing would come from.
I mean, as when one purpose of bringing the legislature in is that they could provide some, well, some legislation that would create some sort of agency. We don't have a county government, so, I mean, we have a sheriff's department and we have a, school district and so on, but in many ways, there may be a need for something like this. And the legislature is the body to consider how this might be done.
Yeah, I met with Ruth Hardy after that meeting we had here in
Yeah.
December, was it?
Yeah.
Ruth came to me and we had a long talk about this, so
Yeah,
I think she understands what the issue is.
okay, good.
Well, Chief, we'll look to hear how the progress goes as you're working through that, and a final report in 90 days, is that what you said?
I hope so. I hope we've got some firm direction. Everybody seems committed to that. We are going to just push this thing. We had a couple other issues that we did at the meeting last night. It's kind of quickie things here, but the Public Safety Committee reviewed the issue of a handicap spot on Park Street and unanimously decided this was not a good place for a handicap spot.
Did you have a request for one, or?
Yeah, there was a request from
Oh,
the
okay.
management of the building, requested a handicap spot there when they located a medical office in there. The terrain isn't suited for building a handicap spot. The drainage issues, you'd lose a whole bunch of parking spaces there to make a handicap spot. It just doesn't work. They were told that before they brought that tenant in, that this is not going to work for handicap. This is probably not a good use of the building.
Yeah.
They went in there because it was available, but we can't, there's no way to make a handicap space there. There's just no room to put it, not without a lot of infrastructure work, and then
Yeah.
you're going to lose a bunch of spaces. So we unanimously turned that down. We looked at the issue of a public nuisance hazard to deal with unsafe buildings that we have here in town. There's one on Butternut Ridge that burned down, that's been sitting there for a couple of years now. There's another building that's fallen apart somewhere else. We had the issue with the blue spruce. And the committee is going to recommend that we look into an ordinance that helps deal with the removal of these buildings. Something a little stronger than the zoning ordinance that exists now. So with that, I've pulled down the ordinance from the city of Barry, which seems to have a lot of teeth in it.
Okay,
So we'll be looking at that, so expect something coming from us, a draft or something of an ordinance or something, concept or something soon that we would like to pursue.
So we'll just make sure that gets through the
policy committee.
Yeah,
before it
oh yeah,
comes to-
we'll follow it through the other channels, but just letting you know what we did at the meeting last night. And finally, we dealt with the issue of on-street parking on Mill Street. I don't want to bore you with the history of that, but our 2-hour signs were taken down and replaced with private signs. So what we've worked out with them to just resolve the issue is we don't care about winter parking or winter towing there. They wanted it all night for their tenants in the Airbnb above the mill building. They have hired Carpenter and Costin, or inherited the contract from Carpenter and Costin to maintain that stretch of the parking. So DPW isn't plowing it. If they're not plowing it, we don't care about towing cars out of there. So they'll use that for winter parking, but I did tell them that during the day, we are going to have a significant parking deficit here, so the rest of that needs to revert back to public parking covered under our parking ordinance for the summer anyway. When this project is done, I met with Mary and Stacy, and she said, we'll review the whole thing after that to see if these 17 or 18 spaces can be used differently. So the issue that we've had is gone, that issue is closed, and we're moving on.
Okay,
That's it.
successful meeting.
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you for the update.
So Kathleen had her Ouija board out, but she was pretty exhausted because her dogs got into
Oh, yeah, I saw
some,
today.
some porcupines. And they didn't just get into them, they wore them. Well, not just their face, they're all the way down their body,
Yeah.
even their hind quarters. So she looks
It's not
much
funny.
fresher today than she did yesterday.
I'm thinking of a hybrid. Is this a hybrid dog and a porcupine? Is that what you?
Oh, my God.
Before today, I didn't know there were porcupines in Vermont.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't know that.
I don't think I've ever seen a dog that plastered with quills. And it wasn't just one, it was two.
2 of them, yeah.
So you want to walk us through your
Sure. So why don't we just start off with a major driver of the changes to the budget this time, the fund balance analysis. We recently received our FY19 budget report, and we had very favorable results last year, and it's pushed our fund balance up to the area of $2.4 million. As a refresher, we aim for a target fund balance of between 10 and 15% of our operating budget. So that would be between $1.1 and $1.7 million. So in order to draw the fund balance down in a tapered way, gradual way, we've proposed a two-pronged approach. One approach is increasing the amount of the fund balance applied to the general fund budget from $150,000, which we've done for the last several years, to $200,000, so an increase of $50,000 for that. And also to draw down the fund balance by applying $192,000 for the purchase of highway fund equipment. As you may recall, we spoke back in June about increasing funding for the highway department's purchase of equipment in a phased approach to $47,000 compounded annually over 5 years. Unfortunately, while that approach, using all increased in tax dollars, does get us to the required $400,000 per year for highway equipment, we will have incurred a significant amount of debt over that period of time, and paying that out doesn't get the job done doesn't put us in a cash position until FY '38 at the earliest. So in order to propose for the board's consideration, we put forward this proposal. And I'll show you the analysis of that. So what we're proposing is to use amount of the fund balance in $192,000 this year, $141,000 next year, $50,000 in the third year, $40,000 in year 4, and $20,000 in year 5. This would allow us to increase the funding as we proposed, $47,000 compounding over 5 years, bring us up to the $400,000 level, and keeping it at that level going forward, which would fully fund the equipment purchases. So without doing that, with continuing to borrow for our equipment while we phased in the increased funding, this is what our debt service would look like for the next 18 years. So by accelerating our full funding of the program, we would be able to fund that $380,000 starting in FY '27. This is an aggressive proposal, but we have the reserves. It does not give us a big fluctuation in the tax rate. You could apply more to the tax rate if you wanted, but then you always have to think of subsequent years when you don't have that available, or you may not have that available. Okay, so that was the big piece, but I'll go through all of the changes made to the third draft of the budget from the second draft. We also talked last time about changing the way we present the use of the local option tax for capital improvements. Let me just pull that up. So if you look at the third column of numbers, what we're doing right now is budgeting local option tax revenue of $650,000. Cross Street Bridge gift from the college of $600,000. You'll see in the local option tax actual for FY '19 is $1 million. So we're way over that $650,000 estimate. And also we're getting a nice interest income on the Cross Street Bridge Fund, $46,000 last year. So what we do with that revenue is fund the Cross Street Bridge debt. We've been transferring everything in excess of the debt service to the Cross Street Bridge Fund. So that was $546,000 plus $46,000 for interest, which went to the Cross Street Bridge Fund. And then what we do, once we transfer it over to the Cross Street Bridge Fund, we've been transferring it back to the general fund for capital improvements. So to streamline that effort and make it a one-step transfer, what I'm proposing to do is retain the local option tax in the general fund and simply transfer what is needed, what is not needed for debt service or capital improvements over to the Cross Street Bridge Fund in a much smaller transfer. And this is the wording that's reflected on the article. Okay, so we have a lot of major things going on here. So that was one change. You have, I've added an interest projection for the Cross Street Bridge Fund. This year was $46,000 with some uncertainty of what it might be. I was very conservative at $22,000 for the estimate this year. I'm looking at a document right at the top of the FY21 budget page, proposed changes to the second draft of the FY21 budget. Applied an additional $50,000 from the fund balance. There's your $192,000 coming, being transferred for equipment fund replacements. Cross Street Bridge Fund Reserve, not making that transfer, up to $557 for capital improvements, because that won't be needed, because we'll retain the local option tax in the general fund. A couple of smaller changes I made to the budget, line item 198 for town manager services and charges for special projects, including the powerhouse. Increasing that from $5,000 to $10,000. We recently received a report from Lincoln Applied Geology about the contamination on the site, and the recommendation for closing the site was to install a high fence and secure the area, and also provide some signage. So this is budgeting for that, to get that project wrapped up. We have been exceeding our budget for audit, so I proposed an increase for that. We also will be going out to bid for audit services this year, so hopefully that number will be close to what we need. And so then here is the opposite of the application of the $192,000 for the fund balance, the expenditure for equipment fund replacements. And then we had, based on Heather's input, rounded the $46,911 to $47,000 for a change of $89.
You're getting a little loose with the budget there, aren't you?
We're running a tight ship, but maybe not that tight. So then at our last meeting, we talked about funding the debt service for the PD adaptive reuse project and the flood resiliency project over a shorter period of time, and using funding from the local option tax for that. So that's a decrease of $9,569.
What kind of time frame are you thinking, Kathleen?
7 years. And then line items 107, this is a continuation of that reallocation of the local option tax and the Cross Street budget, Cross Street Bridge Fund transfers. So,
Kathleen, we still have the $1 million support for the general support to the water project.
right, that's for vote on the town meeting floor.
Okay,
And so I still have that earmarked in the Cross Street Bridge Fund surplus.
okay.
So it doesn't, changing the way we transfer the money out of the Cross Street Bridge Fund, it's not really gonna change how we've tracked things. It's just an internal, like, we're still gonna be able to generate the same reports on
Mhm.
what our surplus is and everything.
Mhm.
like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I wanted to get to. Oh, that's not it. The tax rate estimate. So, with all of those changes, the proposal you have before you increases the amount of tax dollars needed by $58,350, about 0.6 cents on the tax rate, for a total estimated tax rate, including voted veterans exemptions and the fire equipment fund, of 80.88 cents.
And how many, if everybody, if the warnings that are being voted are all voted for, what's the total increase if the voters support?
So we've included debt service for the flood resiliency project and the PD
Yep.
in this budget estimate. We have not included the $5,000 for Turning Point or the money for CVOEO, but that would be like 0.1 cent
So that's
for
minor.
those two
Yep.
times. Yep.
And so then the MREMS would be the other one.
And unless you have any questions about the line item budget, MREMS is here, if you want to discuss that request with them.
Questions of Kathleen?
Good so far.
I think she gets major kudos. This is, something we've been talking about, but the way her process and the way she's laid it out and led us through this, this is how many years in a row we've kept the tax increase to be absolutely minimal, but we're getting some major projects done, so,
Very impressive. Thank you, Kathleen.
thank you. So, we ought to insert as part of this discussion on the budget, our missed request from MREMS. If you could come forward and just talk to us about, excuse me. I was at the farm show all day, so I'm losing my voice, but.
That's all right. I'm gonna pull up another chair.
Yeah,
if that's
pull
all
up
right.
another chair, absolutely.
After you, Dave. Thank you, folks, for fitting us in tonight.
Well, we didn't mean to exclude you, we just missed it.
That's okay. It's a little nervous to see
Okay,
the third
okay.
draft of the budget proposal and to be here at the 11th hour. I'm Ben Fuller. I serve on the board of MREMS. I'm here with Kate Rothwell, who is our executive director. She's prepared a handout that she'll share with you. We're here tonight because we're requesting a fairly significant increase in the appropriation. And Kate's handout goes into a fair amount of detail. And I'll let her walk you through it, but in very brief summary, I'm sure you're all familiar with the fact that every couple of years, MREMS is launching a capital campaign saying, we need to replace another ambulance. And there's a mass appeal to the population. And by and large, we've been very fortunate. They've come through. It's occurred to us that that's probably not the best approach, and that we should be building an equipment replacement fund. And it should be part of our budget rather than these capital campaigns. At the same time, we find that how we're compensating our employees falls below the standards of surrounding departments. So we're losing employees. And they're important because we can't rely on volunteers to the same extent that we may have been able to 10, 20, 30 years ago. At the same time, there are some challenges to our revenue stream that we'll be able to dive into. In short, what it means is that we're coming to all the towns in the county asking for a fourfold increase in the appropriation per resident. So going from $2.50 to $10. And it seems like a tremendous jump, and I have to concede it is. It's something we probably should have been doing more gradually over the years. That said, that $10 per resident appropriation still falls well short of the state average. And I'll let Kate speak to that. With that, I kind of like to turn it over to you because you know much more about the details than I do.
Absolutely, but yeah, again, recapping what Ben said, the two biggest factors for what our business is ambulances to run and people to staff them.
Could you speak into the microphone?
Yeah, could you speak a little louder?
Sorry.
please? Yeah.
Did you hear, or should I repeat? So just recapping what Ben had said, the two most important things to our service as an ambulance service is obviously the ambulances we drive and the staff that care for the patients. So we have experienced some challenges. A recap, just how statistically Middlebury has served, Middlebury Ambulance has served Middlebury. We responded to 1,400 911 calls in the town, 641 transfers out of Porter Hospital, taking them to definitive care. We provide heavy rescue for the towns, and there's 28 motor vehicle accidents. Additionally, we respond with the fire department. Most of that is a response for certain calls. It's an automated response, and we went 65 times with the fire department to assist them. And on an occasion, we support the police department. Again, increases our competition per se, which it never used to be, but ambulance service personnel, it's becoming competitive, to the point where somebody in another service will call up employees, EMS community, it's a small community, and offer them higher wages. There is another service that has just opened up for profit. It does transfers only, and they've been aggressively campaigning for transfers out of Porter Hospital. We run probably 60% 911 calls and 40% transfers, but of that, probably 50% of our revenue is from the transfers. It's our only guaranteed money. If the patient does not have insurance being transferred from one hospital to another, we have a contract with the hospital, so they'll pick it up. Obviously, on the street, somebody calls 911, we don't stop and ask them if they have insurance. We treat them and care for them and basically hope for the best on that piece.
Yeah, just to elaborate on that, so if this for-profit kind of threatens the 911 responders in the communities, and they're doing so, they're threatening our ability to stay in business, and if we lose that, fine, you have someone who can do transfers from hospital to hospital, but you don't have someone who's going to do the 911 response when you have a heart attack at home. And speaking to the compensation to personnel, anecdotally, we're paying personnel less than $15 an hour, some of them, not all. I don't live in Middlebury, I live in Salisbury, but I benefit from the service. If I have a heart attack in the middle of the night, I want someone, I don't want the bottom of the wage barrel necessarily responding to me, if that makes any sense. I want us to be able to recruit and retain higher caliber personnel than those who may be willing to work for a lowest wage. I think it's important.
I agree. We're not at that point yet, but we're definitely trying to look down the road as neighboring towns are able to offer more money. We want to be able to stay competitive. Again, the $2.50 to $10, it is a big jump. We never should have been at $2.50. That was the lowest in the state, unless it was a municipal service. We pulled all the ambulance services in the state, and the average in 2018 was $24.35 per capita for those who were doing per capita. Again, some of them are municipalities. we talked a bit about person. Does anybody have any questions so far? No, okay. So, again, volunteerism, it's pretty difficult these days. It's a two-person working family. There was a time when call volume was less and Middlebury did just 911. People were able to work at their job and leave their job to respond to a call. We run 3,000 calls a year. You cannot run another job and be on the truck at the same time. It's just not feasible. The amount of training required and the cost to maintain that training and increase your cert level is becoming higher and higher. The state's gotten involved. So in order to maintain your credentialing, you have to certify a certain number of hours through the state, which they track. And again, that can be timely and costly. Probably nobody here knows rising costs all throughout, right? Our drug expenses and the cost of equipment is going up. Our ambulances, you're talking about $250,000 to replace a fully stocked ambulance.
We run a fleet of 4, and
Two?
at the rate we rack up mileage, it seems like we need to replace one every 2 years, 3 if we're stretching it.
We have 2 newer ambulances, and when I say newer, when we talk about doing the transfers, it puts the mileage on the trucks. We got one with a grant in 2015, beginning of 2016. That truck has almost 180,000 miles on it. And then the second one is a 2017. That one was purchased with fundraising money that we didn't need to use when we got the grant for the first truck I was talking to you about, and the rest of it was with a loan. Ideally, we have 2 other ambulances that have far surpassed their life expectancy. They're at the point now where we won't take them on long-distance trips, but they're okay for short runs. But looking at a replacement cost, it's probably, if we expected 6 years out of a $250,000 truck, that would be $42,000 per year per truck. So we're looking at $168,000 just to capital account for ambulances. That's once we're on a rotation with 4 serviceable ambulances. Medicaid and Medicare, if anybody wants to talk about insurance, Medicaid and Medicare, if the ambulance bill was out for $1,000, to use easy numbers, Medicaid and Medicare work under an allowable rate. So even if the bill was $1,000, we'd be allowed to bill, say, $400, and it's set. There's no recourse. You can't go after the patient and say you have a balance owed. Of that, the Medicare patients would have a balance of 20% of what was paid. We don't have aggressive collection practices on our elderly if they weren't able to meet their deductible. I mean, if they can do $5 a month, absolutely, but we don't take anybody to court on that instance. Vermont Medicaid allows us to bill at a higher rate than New York does, but because of that, we have to pay a tax. This year, that tax is $39,707. That just allows us to bill. I'd be happy to talk more about insurance, but it looks like you guys might have a long night anyway, so that's our insurance woes. But we outsource our billing. It's very specialized, and they do a good job in collecting overall. When we bill something out, we expect, or we hope, 46% of our billed amount. We have a chart with a payer mix, and just as you can see, and it makes sense, the large proportion of our patients are Medicaid and Medicare, which in our line of business, for the most part, just makes sense. there was a thought of maybe an update on our service areas. So I've been to the other select board meetings, and it's a little bit of mix how everybody does things a little bit different. But we're in the town budget for Shoreham, New Haven, Weybridge, Salisbury, Cornwall, and Orwell. After having a meet with them, they were supportive of us and put it in their budget. Whiting approved us without a meeting. Bridport and Ripton were on a ballot, so the towns vote separately for that. But support from the towns that we've met with so far.
From a per capita basis, though, Middlebury is obviously the sort of largest nut there, and it's going to be critical to the plans to sort of establish that equipment replacement fund, but also improve our recruitment and retention.
The other towns all that do it by inserting it in their budget inserted a $10
Correct.
per capita. We have habitually, I believe, had in our budget what you heard us talking about, two others. They asked for increases this year, and typically what we have in our budget would be what we have habitually done, and then the additional, and we would have you present at the town meeting. Typically, we have some of our services, and the ones that are asking for a raise would be first on the docket to present, and then that would be voted, is what we have habitually done. Doesn't mean we have to do it that way, but it gives voters a chance to hear about what we're supporting. And sometimes it's an opportunity for you that you don't get to get in front of those townspeople.
And if you'd like us to present at the town meeting, we certainly can. We can arrange to have people there. I can only speak from my experience in Salisbury, that the thought was that the ballot items in that town tend to be social service organizations that aren't, I don't want to say of such a critical nature, but it's not emergency response, right? It's more like things like the shelters and the Imagination Library, and some of the other very valuable services that are offered in the county. Emergency services, at least in Salisbury, and from my perspective, I don't know.
Yeah. No, I hear where you're going. It's just, it is a value judgment. And we have talked to the MREMs on several occasions about, and we did increase it some. It's interesting that it's gone that long with no increase, and then pretty significant increase, so I guess I'll open up to the board. Questions?
Not so much a question. I mean, I've been involved in emergency services my whole career. I understand it. And we know it's valuable. I don't appreciate the 11th hour.
No.
No, I mean, admittedly, that's grinding at me. And it's for a large amount that, one of the issues I always have sort of as a concern of are those things that are not under that we are budgeting for, that are not under the control of our town manager. So we know that, not saying you're not managing well, we trust you are, but, a large sum that is not under Kathleen's oversight makes me also a little uneasy. Where does the hospital fit into this? I mean, you're part of the emergency delivery system, and I know in parts of the country, the ambulance system is, you're assigned into a station that's attached to the hospital, and your medications are supplied off of that, even to the point where they're leasing or providing the vehicles, whatever.
Working.
You know, where does that, what's the outlook on that? I mean, we can't obviously continue the situation. Do you see it going that direction, or where do they fit into the whole picture?
Well, I mean, I think Kate can probably speak more effectively to the functional relationship between the two organizations. I can speak to the fact that when UVM took over ownership of Porter, there was some discussion about trying to assume the transfer side of the business, much like this other nonprofit that has stepped in the area. And the board pushed back and said, you know, we have some real concerns about that. We don't want to give that up because that is a revenue stream that we can count on at a much higher return rate. So there was some pushback there. You know, the hospital doesn't offer 911 services. They rely on MREMs to do that.
What runs their helicopter? Is that the hospital running the helicopter?
So the only one ambulance service, which now includes air medical transport, is UVM, of which Porter's affiliated with. Okay, but that, again, it's just critical care transports and interfacility transfers as far as air medical. So UVM Health Net, the big trucks you maybe sometimes see on the road, those are staffed with a paramedic, an RN, and an EMT, and they just do interfacility transfers between their hospitals. And then they did, through the Green Mountain Care Board, they didn't have a certificate of need per se to have a helicopter, so they've gone into a deal with Dartmouth. It's UVM's, but they're kind of flying under, literally and figuratively, Dartmouth's certificate of need.
And if I may, just to speak to your comment about the 11th hour, I appreciate the concern. As an organization, we reached out to the board some months ago, and I think it just wasn't recognized that we were asking for such a significant increase.
I think that's a fair statement.
I'm glad that we followed up and that we were able to meet with you all tonight. Thank you for that.
Okay, thanks.
So I think it's really not necessarily up to the select board. It's really up to the voters, I think, on what they want to support. I mean, we and staff do a great job of putting together a budget, but ultimately the voters decide, you know, how they want to go. And I guess I would like to make sure we give voters the opportunity to support it at town meeting, and I think maybe that's the direction we talk about next. Kathleen had some suggestions on how we incorporate it. And I think I'm in favor of doing a warning so we vote from the floor and give voters the opportunity to tell us that they support it.
I agree, it's something that needs community support.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm personally supportive, but I just want to make sure we do our diligence to get the community's input on their support. So, I don't know how the rest of the board feels, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
Well, it's a budgetary item. I mean, I have to say that I owe my life to you guys in that sense, and I've benefited from your service. So I say, at least in an existential way, I understand the importance of it, and I also understand the fact that we have an aging population, and these services then increase, the need for them increases. It's not just young people having automobile accidents and so on and so forth, and it's tragic in itself. And I mean, I would like to see some sort of town endorsement. I guess the one concern I have is the fact that you waited so long, and not this. I realize that this would have come in with all the budgetary supplement. Well, it did, and so on. And this is an oversight, and it happens. But even then, I think it's the fact that you have this 300% increase in a budget, which and I guess the question is, why did you not, or why were you not sort of monitoring your needs, and so that there could have been a gradual working up towards this? I guess this is my concern, and it's more of a question of management. I think the service you provide is excellent, but it's the management of the facility that's at issue. Having said all that, I would favor an endorsement by the select board as we, insofar as everything we put in the budget is endorsed by us, in a sense that we're saying we would like the taxpayers to contribute to the maintenance and the continuance of these services.
Thank you for that. If I may, just to your concerns about, I can use this. I have a loud voice, but I can use a microphone. Your management concerns, I only have about 8 months' experience on the board, so I can't speak from any kind of historical perspective. What I can say is that we are very fortunate to live in a community and surrounding communities with some very generous individuals. And I think that it was probably short-sighted of the board, but there was success in multiple iterations of public appeals for public support. And I think we're concerned about donor fatigue, and that those costs should be borne by the broader base, rather than just those select few that are able to be so generous.
I agree with that, yeah.
I'm just noticing in 2015, there was a substantial increase from 3,000 to 21,000 to 40. And I agree with them. If it's a phase-in increase, it's much more palatable, I think. This is like 4 times of what we paid last year, right?
Yeah, it is. It's a 4-fold increase. Yeah. I can't argue that point.
So, the question is, how, do we take it to the voters?
Oh, I think we should.
Yeah. And then how
We
do
have
we ask them?
traditionally done that. I'd like to just ask a question before we get to how we're gonna go about it. Kate, do you feel like you guys are being fiscally responsible now? Is it, I mean, I have a little background I was on the board there for a number of years, and we started, there was a bunch of fiscal mismanagement, and I think we felt, number one, it was irresponsible of us to ask for more until we've managed what we were getting correctly. And then we went out for appeals, and we did get a lot of support. And I agree, I think there's generally a service like that, it's tough with all of the appeals that people get to constantly fund it on just an appeal basis. But even a lot of the billing wasn't being done timely, and so while the reimbursement rate is low on Medicaid and Medicare and whatnot, you at least get something if you file on time. Your billing agency doing, can you tell us that
So absolutely, I again, maybe wasn't part of that then.
You weren't there at the time.
Right, but I obviously know some stories. I've been in this position interim for 5 months and then just appointed, but I've been with Middlebury Ambulance for 6 years, so I have seen some ups and downs.
Yeah.
And certainly have heard about them. Being fiscally responsible, absolutely, we're very aware of what's coming in and what's going out, and although it seems like a bold step, it's very fiscally responsible to ask for less than what half the state average is taking on town appropriations. We know where the money needs to go. We want it to fund ambulances and keep staff. We keep track of the staff and their report writing, so the reports are done in a timely fashion. Those reports get sent to MBS, who does our billing for us. If there's any issues, it gets kicked back to me. And there's certain small things like a coding error or a signature in a wrong spot, but we're very on top of that. So the billing end is going very well. The revenue, it is what it is. It's something every ambulance services is struggling with. Fairhaven was almost closed. I'm sure you read the papers, or maybe you did not, but that service did not have anybody running it for over a month, and they don't have full coverage as it is. Bristol struggled. We actually wound up doing quite a few mutual aid calls to that town because they were unable to cover their shifts. We don't want to wind up like that. We want to be viable. We have a bookkeeper. She does a great job. Everything gets scanned to her. She's able to categorize things in ways. I know more about QuickBooks now than I ever wished I possibly could. But if you wanted to know how much our oldest ambulance had in repairs since she's been doing it, it's all subcategorized. So things are definitely on the right track, and we want to keep them moving that way.
Yeah.
The ambulance that we got with the grant, we look for them. The AFG grants, there was nothing for us this year, and we can't rely on that. We can't rely on the possibility of a grant or the possibility of somebody donating to keep our tires turning.
I can speak a little bit to just fiscal responsibility and controls, in that in the time I've worked with the organization, there have been several dramatic changes to the controls that are in place. There's now an annual audit conducted by an external accountant. We have an internal audit that's conducted annually. We have the independent bookkeeper. Counter signatures required on checks over a certain amount. And in terms of the billing, what we're making back from MBS, the increases in our receivables cover the cost of MBS, I believe, over what we were receiving before. So having outsourced that billing has been a tremendous boon.
Well, professional knows how to code it right.
Well, that's exactly right.
So, one last question on that. Is there any pressure that can be put on the hospital to continue to utilize your service for the transfer and the need for supporting the MREMs and keeping it within the community? I mean, it would be a pretty black mark that's the one income source that, and you're providing a service, you're bringing them the majority of their, or at least a lot of their patients, so.
So we have a contract with them, and they have held their contract. We are absolutely their first call, but if we don't have the staff, because we always leave a truck here for 911, so we're not going to take our
Yeah.
only truck. So if we have one truck out on a transfer already, and they call and say, can you do another one? And we say it's going to be 2 hours, they'll call.
Yeah.
Because ultimately they want, if the patient's ready to be discharged or transferred to another hospital, they want to free up the bed.
But they're committed to giving you first option.
Yes, and they do, and they honestly want to,
Okay.
It's a good relationship.
yes. Middlebury and Porter have a
I
good.
thought it was, and that's why, but in the brief here, it talked about the threat of another outside
It's not
transport service.
It's not Porter UVM.
Yeah,
It's a it's a for-profit outfit called Connect.
yeah.
And they are,
The-
they're going after the transfer business.
Well,
the
It's a
other
guaranteed pay,
That's exactly.
so.
And the other piece with that is eventually, as Porter's affiliated with UVM, UVM wants to, it's called one call, and they want to be, so if, as ridiculous as it sounds, if they have a patient that needs to go from the emergency department back to Helen Porter, the doctor is going to call up to UVM, so UVM can dispatch the correct resource. And that's when we're gonna lose our transfers, and they're planning on this happening within the year. So rather than the doctor calling over, or the nurse, which it typically is, and saying, hey, you know, the patient so-and-so you brought in, they're ready to go back over, they're gonna call up to a call center who's going to dispatch what they feel is the most appropriate resource, which in that instance is going to be us. In another instance, we don't know.
At some point, I mean, I think we're in a better position than some of these communities. I know that a number of communities have been losing the service throughout central Vermont. It, you
The
know,
disparate
it-
revenue
it-
streams that MRAMs have is critical. So
Yeah.
the dispatch service, the transfer service,
Yeah.
a lot of them, they're only doing 911 response. And they're the ones that are really struggling.
Yeah.
So
Would the board like to do it?
well, I echo what Heather was saying, that we need to let the voters decide this, and it's been very informing for you to be here tonight as one way that voters can see the presentation, and they'll get a chance at town meeting to also see that. I just wanted to ask another question about any conversation you're having with surrounding EMS like Bristol, you know, to merge. Is there any future for that, and does that strengthen you?
Those talks have happened, and they go about as well as school consolidations. Honestly, I mean, people want to maintain their independence. They don't understand how we have offered to dispatch, because that would save, our dispatch center would. We've offered to share personnel. We've offered to share schedules, and it's met with resistance.
That's too
We
bad.
do offer other resources, though, that are accepted. So Kate has been instrumental in bringing some new trainings to Middlebury, and surrounding departments are coming. They're sending members to take advantage of that. I mean, I think it's fair to say that we're a central hub for those surrounding communities.
All right, well, thank you. Did you have anything?
And thank you for your service.
Yeah, and this thing, and I'm sitting there, and again, I've been in emergency services, I appreciate what you do, and I know that, hopefully I don't need you tonight, but I know if I do, you'll be there, and I appreciate the fact, you're critical to what we do. I think maybe part of it is even how it's presented, because, you know, you hear a 400% increase, that raises red flags. When you hear 7/10 in tax rate, that raises red flags. However, when you hear $10 per person, okay, I'm thinking that's basically one recycling pickup at my house per month for what it's getting charged. That is not unreasonable. So I think that would be the one item I would say. I agree this should go to the voters, but I think it's in the presentation could lead to success.
Thank you.
So I'll move to place an article on the warning for voting on the floor, that the voters can choose to amend or support at town meeting.
I'm sorry, may I just interject with one suggestion?
We should just get a second on that, sorry.
Sorry, could the article be for the increase
That's what it is.
over the budget?
That is what it is.
No, we already have you budgeted for last year's amount.
Okay,
Yep.
perfect, thank you.
Okay. Thoughts on the board?
Makes sense. That's a good way to go.
All right, all in favor of supporting the additional request with warning to be voted on the floor at town meeting? Signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, somebody will need to be there to talk and answer about
When do you
questions,
hold your
answer
town meeting?
questions.
Monday.
Monday night. on March.
We will have representatives there.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Appreciate it.
Consider, like, so in the town capital budget, you may have heard some of our discussion about funding our equipment. Consider, creating a plan for what you want the next 5 to 10 years to look like, what you need every year to fund that, and come back every year and, keep it as consistent as you can and for what you need.
And part of my discussions with the other boards is that I do believe we were remiss in not reaching out, although it is time and effort, and there's a lot of select boards between the towns we cover, but that we'd very much like to come and talk, not at budget time, not at the 11th hour, just kind of, hey, this is where we're at, this is how things are going, this is,
Yeah.
as we run on a fiscal year, July, I can tell you what the budget looked like the year before. Yeah, so in the fall, maybe we could come and talk again.
Is there consistency, relative consistency among the vehicles from EMS to EMS across the state? And the reason I ask the question is that, certain states, I think California is an example, they have some standardization, so they're going off and they're bidding blocks. They're going to communities and saying, okay, who needs an ambulance this year? Who needs a fire truck? And then, so then what they'll do is they'll end up saying, okay, of course, they're obviously, the scale is so much bigger, but they're sitting there saying, we're gonna need 100 units. And so then, getting more favorable pricing. In fact, I think actually New York State does that with school buses, but it's the idea of
No,
that.
it's such a good point, Nick. We're going through it right now as we discuss what we're gonna look at for the next ambulance for the department. There are so many different ways to configure one of the boxes. So the truck itself is one thing, but in terms of the box, the length, the height, the configuration of the compartments and the lighting and everything else, and there are standards, but there's not a standard design.
Okay.
And people have very strong preferences about how they're laid out.
I know they do. Oh, yeah, you're putting the term mildly.
Okay, so one last piece of guidance. I would look for your briefing to see what you're gonna show. But plan on 5 minutes, you may get 10, but that'll be absolute most. And so being clear, concise, to the point, okay? We spent a lot of time on it tonight. I usually wouldn't give this much time for discussion like this, but I think there's interest in what's going on with our MREMs that all of a sudden is coming out. Pretty dramatic change in the way they're funding their operation. I'm not sure that it came across tonight, so I think that's really something that ought to be clear. How you funded it, where you're going, why, and quick. Okay? Thanks. All right.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, appreciate it.
So Kathleen's gonna walk us through our warning, draft warning.
Okay, let me just
Are we already there?
safely eject this. If I know how to do that.
Thank you again for the time, I know everybody's.
So,
That's important.
just another quick comment. Chief Shaw of the fire department has done a really great job of putting a committee together for the design of fire trucks. And maybe just, if you had a chance, talk with him on how they go about, because they're just starting another committee to look at a proposal for another new truck, and just kind of how they went about it. Maybe you would gain some insight on what they've done.
Yeah, I'd absolutely love to share that. We have a committee, so maybe they can get together and talk. I know we tried to keep things local, so rather than buying the chassis out of state, we're gonna look at Keystone, and they actually came in very favorable. To do the work on the truck, it only makes sense.
Yeah.
They said they didn't think they could compare because they don't, it's a contract, because it's, but they actually came in under. So that's a great idea.
Thank you.
So just a couple of things to wrap up with the budget. I promised you a December 31, 2019 year-to-date budget report, and we seem to be on track with the general fund budget, about where we should be this year at this time. However, Bill Kernan reports that DPW has already spent our current budget for salt, and the shed is about 1/3 full, which is normally where they are at year's end. As you know, we came into the year with a deficit with salt, and it would not surprise Bill Kernan if we had an overrun this year of $30,000 to $40,000 in DPW.
Nope, there's not going to be any more ice.
Thank you.
Like the positive thinking.
The other budget reports for equipment, water, and sewer are in your packet, and likewise, they are on track. There are some ups and downs with the wastewater revenue stream. I don't know if that's a good word, but the wastewater revenue stream, and we're expecting a surplus there due to increased septage dumping at the facility. And then finally, before we move on, if the budget as presented is acceptable to you, a motion would be in order to finalize it.
I realized that after we started back on the budget, we didn't finalize that.
So I'll move to finalize the FY21 general fund budget for presentation to the voters at town meeting on Monday, March 2nd.
Second. Moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? Hear none, all in favor of finalizing the budget, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed?
So the budget that we've approved does not include the increase
No.
that we just talked about, and so that is something that will change that picture if the voters support it.
Right. Is that a penny?
What, 0.7 cents?
7 cents?
$63,000.
7/10?
So I took, just before we get distracted with the rest of the budget warning, I took a try at drafting an article on Middlebury Regional EMS, and I'll run that by you. Shall the town of Middlebury vote to increase its appropriation for Middlebury Regional Emergency and Medical Services, MEMS, by $63,720 from $21,240 to $84,960 to support Middlebury Regional EMS's mission to provide quality emergency medical services, including paramedic and heavy rescue service, emergency dispatch and answering, medical education, and community outreach.
Good.
The only thing I wonder is how it sounds with what Nick suggested in using the per capita numbers, or in addition to, like, do we have to use the actual dollar amounts, or can we say?
I think we should use the dollar amounts and then as part of the presentation, talk about per capita.
That's what I think.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because the budget's actually based on dollars.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
they would ask that anyway.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
So does that end up going in the other, with the other?
So I would put that in with, as Article 7, or would you like to put that right after the general fund budget at Article 4?
I think it's better there,
At Article 4,
after Article 4. Yeah.
after Article 3,
3.
between Article 3 and 4?
Okay.
So we would do the budget and then
Yes.
tackle.
After Article
that.
3.
That would be the new Article 4.
Yes.
So,
Because the others are being voted on on the ballot, right?
So I'll go through the changes with you. On Article 2, since you've accepted the proposal to apply some of the fund balance, we'll be changing Article 2 to borrowing for police equipment only, $80,000. We increased the amount from $76,000 to reflect the higher prices of these cruisers in general, not only the hybrid. The cruisers in general were more expensive this year. Filled in the amounts for the general fund budget, highlighting the amount that we're going to be using of the local option tax for capital improvements. No change in the 2 installments for property taxes due, the delinquent tax collection policy. And then on Article 6 is our $1 million for the water system improvements. And we are proposing to do both the $1 million from the Cross Street Bridge Fund for water system improvements and the bond vote in order to keep our options open if there is attractive financing or loan forgiveness available from the state, which hasn't been confirmed at this point. If the bond vote is approved, you don't have to draw on that. You can keep it on the shelf until it's needed.
And that would be we need to make sure we educate.
Yep. And we're looking.
I think because of the low turnout based upon versus total voters, we need to get a good article in the paper.
We do have presidential primary this year, which may
That'll increase the
turnout
Yeah.
significantly and increase early voting. So the article that featured Dan in the newspaper recently about the water system was very good.
Did you get much feedback from that? Did you get any feedback from it?
It didn't. It did get a lot of feedback from the bank display that we had.
I was gonna say 2 things. Can we think about putting that bank display up, like in the hallway?
It's a great idea.
And I'm happy to help if we need to, talk to Chris and see if we can't do some, because we have all that stuff still, right? Yeah. The other thing I wondered is, it might make sense to do what is Article 6 and what is Article 10 back to back,
Okay.
only because they're so related. I feel like they really should be, but I don't know if it's possible to move them, because I know that 10 is related to the Australian ballot, so.
These all are going to be Australian ballot, everything on this page.
But 6 is from the floor, that's the 1 million from the Cross Street Bridge. Is it possible, as part of Article 7, to move 10 up to 8? So that they followed each other more closely? Because they're so, I don't know, whatever the board.
That's fine.
You mean a little more closely, because we'd still be covering all the business in Article 7 before we got to that?
Well, all of the stuff in Article 7 is the Turning Point Center representative to be determined. That's right now Article 8. 9, CVOEO.
Right.
That's the next thing. So my only suggestion is just changing the order of those things. So the first thing we talk about in 7 relates to the thing that we just ended up talking about on the floor. Because I can see there being questions and overlap and.
Oh, that's, yes.
Yeah,
So,
I think that
so
makes
the,
sense.
so the water system bond vote discussion would come first under Article 7.
Turning Point.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes, good idea. Yeah. And for that matter, maybe flood resiliency
Yeah.
bond
Flood
vote, like, I
resiliency
be
for that.
moved Turning Point and CVOEO to the more toward the bottom.
So reorganize those,
Yeah,
put the bond votes first, and then the
Flood
new
resiliency.
appropriations
Police
at
Department.
the bottom.
Then Turning Point maybe, and then, yeah.
Just a brief update for the board on the flood resiliency project. We have had some more encouraging communication with FEMA, and the project does seem to be moving forward on that front. Project manager Amy Sheldon has pledged to work her hardest every single Monday, pressuring FEMA to move forward with their commitment.
That's good.
And then, I think I may have done this last time, touched up the wording, clarified the wording on the PD adaptive reuse project, making it clearer what we're doing there.
I thought it was good.
Okay, so I will, if you're agreeable to this, I'll rearrange those articles. I'll add the article on Middlebury Regional EMS and get this together for you in the next couple of days for your signature.
Do we have to finalize tonight, or? Yeah. Yep.
Do you have something else?
I had a tiny thing about the town poll, which I realized we already did. But I was hoping we could add the midteens.org
Oh.
to it, and then also to the town website. Okay.
We don't list all of them, though.
No, I know, but it's one that the town funds significantly and should be on the list.
So I'll make a motion to finalize
Copies.
the 2020 town meeting warning for publication with the amendments we've indicated tonight.
Second that.
Moved and seconded. Any other comments on that? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Heather?
Okay, I've reviewed the warrants this afternoon and find them to be in order. I'll move to approve the total expenditures in the amount of $363,113.94, consisting of accounts payable of $250,286.78, and payroll of $112,827.16 for the period of January 15, 2020 through January 28, 2020.
Seconded by Victor. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay. Kathleen, Town Manager's Report.
I don't have a lot to add, just to note that the platform meeting, the rail platform meeting is here at the town offices tomorrow night at 6:30.
Ooh. Forgot about that. I wanna be here.
That's it for my report.
I won't be able to
Okay.
make it. I've got, it's the late night for the farm show. So. Okay, board member concerns. Snick.
I don't have anything, Brian.
Farhad?
I hope best wishes for your dogs, Kathleen.
Oh,
Victor?
I'll second that.
Just quickly, after multiple emails, have finally managed to schedule the next Creek Road Task Force meeting for next Friday, February 7th at 8 a.m. In the small conference room. So just an update if anyone was, we would hopefully be deciding on a revised final version. And so I wanted everyone to be there, and so we've just had a little bit of a struggle finding a time that all of us could be there. So that's the plan for right now.
How long do you meet, about an hour or more?
An hour?
Because the BMP,
90 days.
BMP's meet,
I think we usually shoot for about an hour and a half, you know, it's usually about by,
I
Try
think
to be done.
BMP starts here at 8.
yes.
So I'm
Well,
gonna be
they're
here.
gonna be here, we're gonna be in the little coffee
Yeah, I
shop.
just didn't know if I should jump over there and come
Oh,
back.
sure, yeah.
You'll know it's done when they all get carried out by MREMs, so.
Or hear a lot of shouting or something.
No, we've actually been working pretty well together.
I heard you were. Laura?
I just want to say that I think that the town of Middlebury does a lot to respond to homelessness. It's not always obvious, but our services, you know, both our library services, our rec services, our police response, and our social services that we support are all part of that story. You know, so I think we have a stronger story than we think, even though we're not providing a boarding house. And it will be wonderful for us to work toward those kinds of housing solutions. The town of Middlebury does care and do a lot, you know, on behalf of responding to these acute conditions. And I think it's good for us to continue to ask ourselves, what are we doing and what can we continue to do? So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you.
Nothing for me.
Okay, I think the 5th was the drop dead, but the sooner you can get your RSVPs back to Kathleen for our gathering in farewell, would be appreciated.
About what?
Did you get your packet? Top page of your packet for the executive session is a
Yeah, yeah.
menu.
Yes.
Menu.
I actually, I had a personal meeting with Kathleen today.
So do we have to decide on seating for town meeting tonight, or do we have time to figure that out
I was
next?
gonna ask that.
I gave you a note about seating for town meeting and suggested that we wrap that up next time.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, it'd be kind of nice, I'd kind of like to go over and see. I've been a while since I've had a kid in high school, so.
I was just there last night.
And if you have options that aren't in that Kathleen laid out, be creative, so. As
Yeah,
far as
and
the
if
seating.
anybody has a great option that you'd like to try out, we could get some tables together and go over there and take some pictures, and bring them back to the board for discussion.
Good idea.
I'm happy to have a seat.
I have some ideas. Maybe I'll send you an email.
Okay, we have a number of legal matters to discuss in executive session.
In accordance with Vermont's open meeting law requirements, I move that the board find that premature general knowledge of the consideration of legal matters would clearly place the select board at a substantial disadvantage because the select board risks disclosing its litigation strategy if it discusses the legal matters in public.
Second.
Moved and seconded, all in favor
Oh, my
signify by saying aye.
Goodness, before we do that, I'm sorry. This gal is here from CVOEO
Uh-oh.
on the warning.
Too late.
I'm not here really for a big presentation. It was kind of, I wanted to come and just let you know that once we got our petition for nonprofit funding, I didn't want to have that be on your ballot without someone coming from our office to just say hello and be available if you had any questions about why we had put in a petition this year, and to have information about CVOEO in case it was something you were interested in having. But it's really underwhelming after everything you've already listened to tonight, I'm sure.
Oh, try it.
You Jeanette.
Yes, I'm Jeanette.
Okay, that explains my little note here. Thank you.
So, our organization was founded in 1965. The person who's worked in our office longest is 25 years, and to her recollection, we have not asked the towns we served in Addison County for funding. It's an initiative we started last year to look at the towns we serve. And we got on Weybridge, Cornwall, and Ripton last year, and they approved us for funding. This year, I was very hopeful we get the signatures, but I really handed them in like the day before, and we did get them, which was very exciting. But I didn't come earlier to kind of present information or make you aware of what we were trying to do because we were short last year, so I did not want to spend your meeting time for something that might not happen. But I do have information here with the handouts. The last 2 pages is more kind of the funding sources. Up in Burlington, their office, they do have people who are not doing direct client, care, so they're able to kind of go out in the community to ask for town funding. Before William worked in our office, their days are all spent with direct client care, so there really isn't, we're lacking a Jean or someone else who can just go out and be available in the community. But we really made an effort last year to kind of go out there and make people aware that we were there. The clients we serve always find us. It's just the greater community that sometimes forgets we're behind the car wash. We're on Creek Road behind the car wash.
Oh, sorry.
So, yes, but our clients find us. So we're always busy with them. It's just the greater community, I find, even with my petitions, everyone's like, oh, those, like, what do your letters stand for? So it's kind of like, yeah, we're still here. It's kind of just, we're not really out in the community being able to promote ourselves for people who are not necessarily in need of our services, but just be aware that we exist to kind of refer us to others.
We're just sometimes asked how you distinguish yourselves from Hope.
Just wondering.
There are actually a lot of things that are similar that we do. I would say like food and fuel and housing are kind of complementary programs. We refer a lot of people back and forth. CVOEO does, we are the group that helps manage Head Start locally. So we also do weatherization. And for fuel, we run like the LIHEAP program for giving crisis fuel for people in the community who make between 185 and 200% over the federal poverty line. That's a program where people they come directly to us for assistance, or they can come to us for assistance after their seasonal fuel benefits have been gone through and it's still January. And they still need fuel. So those are kind of our programs that are different than Hope, but there are also a lot of communications between us of kind of complementary, kind of using the resources each agency has to best serve the people. There are some that we can't serve if they make over income cutoffs that we would refer to Hope. Hope, if they receive people there and they realize they fall into our income guidelines, they send them to us. So there's very much a lot of referral back and forth.
Thank you.
So you serve a different economic window than
We're kind of restricted to people who would qualify for 3 squares. Those are families that fall under 185% over federal poverty line, because that's a cutoff for 3 squares. That tends to be the cutoff for a lot of our programs. But if it's a federal grant for housing, those numbers can fall anywhere up to like 200% depending on what the grant is. So I would say, yes, Hope has the flexibility to help people that maybe are over that 185 or 200%, or things where our grants just don't allow us to serve them, that they have the flexibility that they can use their funding for a slightly higher income level. But there are things like housing, that there's a Wednesday, the Housing Task Force, all the agencies meet together, and it's generally, I think, one grant that's available to everyone right now. And they go together and discuss their clients and kind of see how they can best serve the wider community with that grant resource that's available for everyone.
Okay.
Did that answer your question, Ellen?
So we did include in our approval an article, the number will change, so I'm not sure, but Kathleen has it up. So that would be an Australian ballot vote, because it is a new, right? That's how.
New request.
When we have a new request for funding, it's, the policy is that for an Australian ballot from the voters, so.
New or increase. And-
Yeah.
And we'll have you presenting, or somebody there for questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh,
Yeah,
you're welcome.
Thanks for coming tonight.
No, you're very welcome.
Thanks.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor and a second. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
I further move that the board enter into executive session to discuss legal matters under the provisions of Title I, Section 313A1 of the Vermont statutes.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Okay.
Those aye
We
or
will
not
enter
aye?
executive session at 8:50.